And now to talk about the case in South Carolina that's now become a high-profile case. Cheryl Dorsey is a retired LAPD sergeant. She served on the force for 20 years. Good to see you. And HLN legal analyst Joey Jackson joining us from New York City, plus criminal profiler Pat Brown joining me from Washington, D.C. Good to see you all as well. All right, Cheryl, you first. Let's talk about this out of San Bernardino involving San Bernardino police. You were a police officer in Los Angeles for 20 years, and when you look at this video of how this suspect was apprehended and how he was treated, what goes through your mind in terms of whether there is a systemic problem as we now look at video of not just officers in San Bernardino, but now we're also talking about the police officer at North Charleston, and many people are aghast at how they see officers treating suspects.
Clearly, it's systemic, it's cultural, and it's the way some police officers have been conducting themselves all along. We're just starting to see it more and more. And so I like to refer to this as a pack mentality. When you have a group of officers at the end of a foot pursuit, a vehicle pursuit, they become involved in tunnel vision. And a beating is generally what happens. And we understand that officers do this routinely.
Routinely. So, Joey, we've got Cheryl saying, as a former LAPD officer, this happens all the time. It's a systemic problem, that people are seeing it with new eyes by way of videotape. In this case, a news helicopter. In the case of South Carolina, a bystander's cell phone. What does this say to you about how you get at the problem? How do you end something that is systemic? And does this mean that it means the active participation of civilians, people to use their cameras and cell phones in which to capture these images?
Fredricka, there certainly is a problem. I don't want to paint police officers with too broad of a brush. We know that police officers are there to serve and protect. My dad was one, may he rest in peace. As a former prosecutor, I certainly work with a lot of honorable officers who were about fighting crime and doing it decently, forthrightly, and engaging in it as a public service. However, that being said, clearly there's another problem that we need to deal with. When you see videos like we see here, it's troubling. When you see, and I get and understand, you're in pursuit of someone, the adrenaline's flowing, you have to catch him, but unless I'm seeing a different video than the rest of us are, he's certainly the suspect, who is white, by the way, is clearly surrendered. He's on the ground. He does not look like he's posing a threat at all. And here you're showing the other video. We could certainly speak about that, where the officer acted in a completely criminal fashion. I mean, I don't know how you justify that. We could talk about that later. But the bottom line, Fredricka, is that you need to bridge the gap. And in order to bridge the gap, there has to be trust and there needs to be mutual respect. And when you see instances like this, when officers are acting out, it goes against that trust, against that mutual respect. So the best we can hope for in this situation, there needs to be an administrative review where these officers need to be discharged, fired, suspended, disciplined, depending upon the conduct they engage in. And certainly on the other track, a criminal investigation so that they can be held criminal accountable, both in terms of the state law and in terms of the federal civil rights law, for acting in a way that is intentional and a way that deprives this person of their civil rights. Okay, and so Pat, I want to show that video of the North Charleston, or the former North Charleston police officer, after the shooting of Walter Scott one more time, as we watch it in slow-mo. And when you hear Joey use the word, troubling, you hear Cheryl say it's a systemic problem. And now you look at this incident, which really helped bring about the charge of now murder to this officer just days after the killing of Walter Scott. And you look at his demeanor as a profiler, what do you see? Do you see that the words systemic and troubling are in concert with this kind of behavior, how cavalier it seems as he handcuffs the man who has been shot 5 times, and how he now drops what appears to be something that helps plant evidence? We still are unclear what that is exactly, but how do you look at this behavior? How do you explain it?
Okay, I think first of all, I want to go back and look at the situation from the beginning. We're talking about it isn't routine. There may be a problem within the system, but it's not routine. If you go out with a cop, do any ride-alongs, you'll note that all day long the routine is generally to be polite and respectful, and they use a lot of restraint with a lot of bad-acting people. Now, what sometimes happens when you have a pursuit is that immediately when that pursuit begins, the life of an officer or officers and the citizens are being put at danger from the beginning. So there's already that adrenaline rush. What the heck are you doing? I'm now at risk. Now I'm afraid because I don't know what's going on here. So when we have a look at Slager, Officer Slager, when he stopped the vehicle, let's start at the beginning there, we saw him acting in a very appropriate manner, very respectful, not condescending, and he was getting a story he was probably questioning. I was like, yeah, you don't have any paperwork? Okay, wait a minute. But he was being polite. Went back to his car doing his routine. We have somebody then flee the scene, which he has to question right there. So, what is this guy about? There's something troubling here. He has to go pursue him because that's his job. He does so, and at the time he then gets contact with him, there is some kind of struggle. So again, we have some kind of possible resisting arrest.
Well, that's the problem. We don't really know that part. We know that there was one witness who said there was a tussle, but what we're trying to evaluate is what you can see.
Okay,
and that's
well,
the
wait a
portion
minute.
that
Wait a
people
minute.
find troubling. So
wait a minute.
So let's stick to what we have, and then you can assess.
Hold on a second. We had something that happened there, and we have him. Then we have Scott running again from the police officer. All right. At this point is where the issue comes in. Up until that point, I don't see that Slager has acted in an inappropriate manner. I do see that Scott has acted in an inappropriate manner. But here's the big issue. When you pull the trigger on a gun, there is one and only one reason you do that. That is because you believe you're in imminent danger of being killed. In other words, you'd rather go into a courtroom than into a box. And take, that's the chance you'll take. Because you believe you don't pull the trigger, you will die.
Okay, so
or somebody else will die.
You're really addressing what everyone is looking at here, which is help us understand the natural reaction that now an officer might have, or this officer might have. Your suspect is on the ground, has 5 bullets in the back, and now your natural inclination, most people might think your natural inclination may be, oh my gosh, I just shot somebody, I just hurt somebody, I'm going to now administer some kind of aid. You don't see that. Instead, what you see is this rather cavalier approach, and so I'm asking if you
I think we're putting
can
cavalier,
assess that.
We're putting cavalier into the heads. This is a guy who has worked in many situations. This is the routine you do, regardless of what has sort of happened. My point is to go back. My point is
to handcuff someone who's been shot in the back and routine to drop something.
He doesn't know what he doesn't know. First of all, we don't know what he dropped.
Okay,
hold on. Let me finish it. I want to finish my statement. The whole point comes down to, in the court of law, which is what Slager has to prove, is did he have the right to pull the trigger? Was he at that moment absolutely positive, and would every police officer agree, and regular citizen, that he had to pull the trigger in order to save his own life?
Okay, the answer is no. Stop right there for a moment. Then Joey, if you could respond, and then Cheryl, I'd like to hear your take on
Yes, I will. The fact is that I don't have any issue with putting the word cavalier there, because that's exactly what I see. It appeared to me that Officer Slager was much more concerned with his well-being and going and getting whatever it was that he dropped by the body that was there of Walter Scott, that he wasn't administering aid or assisting him in any way. That's a travesty. The reality is that yes, protocol may call for cuffing a person who we don't know is injured or dead. You want to make sure you're okay. But thereafter, certainly you could assist in some way, and not to assist at all, but to engage in the act of planting evidence is very troubling, to say the least. Furthermore, well, we don't know what it is, but it appears to be.
Wait until you're puzzled. You do not know that yet, and that's for the court to decide.
Pat, if you would allow me, as I allowed you to further make my point. That's an issue. That's a very big issue. But backing up before that, I'm troubled because legally, this is very problematic. Here's why, Fredricka. Number one, when you shoot and kill someone, are you in imminent danger of being dead yourself? When a threat is running away from you, it certainly doesn't appear that you're in danger. Number two, when you use force, the force must be in proportion to the threat posed against you. If someone is 5, 10, 15, 20 feet away, what danger are they posing? Step 3, are you acting reasonably? And if you look at all in total the reasonableness of this conduct, I don't think by any measure when someone's running away from you it's reasonable. Last point here, and again it involves the law. Tennessee versus Gardner, 30 years ago, the Supreme Court said, even if a suspect's fleeing, even if they're a felon, the only time that you're justified in using deadly force is if you yourself or someone else as a police officer either is in danger of serious bodily injury or in danger of death.
That's just what I said.
I don't
That
see
is
the
just
justification
what
from
I
a criminal
said.
profiler or any other justification.
I just said that exact words, but you just repeated me. What I said was, that is the whole issue of the whole case here. And that goes to court, and Slager has to prove that there was some reason. He thought the guy was going to turn, and he thought he had another weapon on him. He has to prove that. If he can't prove that, then he goes down. That is my point. Let's focus on what the actual issue is. Did he have the right to pull the trigger?
Okay.
Fredricka, may I say something?
Go, Cheryl. Yes, please.
So listen, officers receive an inordinate amount of training, and the tactics that led up to this shooting were outrageous. Had he not pursued a suspect without adequate backup, we would not be in this situation. And he understood, Officer Slager, when he fired that trigger, he knew absolutely there was no probable cause, there was no immediate defense of life, and that is why he created an audio record of "he took my taser" to try to justify a shooting that was unjustifiable. And he exacerbated that by now going and placing the taser within close proximity to the body to further corroborate this lie that he is formulating and telling.
That sounds pretty simple. Simply put.
Let's take that to court and let that be proven in court. That's all I'm saying. Did he have the right to pull the trigger? It's very simple.
I think the prosecution certainly will have a very good basis of proving what we see, unless we don't believe our lying eyes.
All right.
And of course he didn't have the right to pull the trigger. Officers are taught to escalate and de-escalate force. And you can only use that force that's reasonable to overcome the resistance. There was no resistance. Mr. Scott was running. The officer was incapable of catching him and shot him because he could not stop him.
And I wonder, as an officer, Cheryl, if you were in a situation like that and you see that there's another passenger in the car, if your instinct would be to run after the person who just ran away, or would you call for backup, or would you even want to investigate who is the other person in the car to find out if you are in any sort of danger, or if you need in any way to further investigate before you were to run after someone? Would that be your instinct as an officer? Or would you leave your car, your squad car, and that other vehicle and that other passenger there to pursue the other suspect?
The tactics that the officer used were awful. You never run after a suspect because it could have been a setup. He doesn't know if that suspect took off running because the passenger was now going to shoot him in the back. What he should have done was he should have radioed to responding units backup that the suspect was running and give a direction and allow his responding units to try to further detain him, and then his focus should have been on that person in the vehicle and not leave his police car open with weapons and other things that possibly could have been driven away with by this other person. And so the tactics were terrible, and he's going to have to speak to that use of force. He's going to have to articulate why he tasered Mr. Scott, why he fired each and every round that was fired. I don't see any justification for any of that.
Fredricka, I'm also wondering if Cheryl Dorsey could address the issue of verbal commands. What about as he's running away? Stop, halt, don't move, freeze, don't go any further. Is it troubling to you as a person of long standing in law enforcement that no verbal commands were used?
We heard taser, taser, taser.
Taser, taser, taser. I'm speaking about giving him an indication as he's running away, as the taser doesn't work, to tell him to stop. Is that something that you might have done if you're in a police force in a situation like this?
Cheryl?
He's not really required to say stop. Mr. Scott understands who he is. He's a police officer. He's in uniform, and they had just had an encounter. But again, when you look at the tactics, and we understand that this is not the first time that Officer Slager used excessive force. That's what he does. You don't escalate to a deadly force incident unless you've been abusive and overzealous previously. That's the way he conducts. Well, in 2013, he pulled a man out of his home at a 459 investigation, beat him, tasered him, and took him to the police station because he wasn't convinced when the man came to the door in his underwear and a T-shirt that he was a resident. And when his mother said, "My son lives here," he still was not convinced. And so he took this gentleman to the police station. He took this gentleman to the police station to do what? I don't know. But this was not the first time that he used excessive force.
We're talking about 6 years on the force, you have a complaint. And what you're doing is you're convicting this guy on everything. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't be convicted. I'm just simply saying stick to the facts of what we actually do know.
Except that history will be something that is folded into, especially since we're talking about a case.
Yeah, but hopefully in the courtroom. Hopefully in the courtroom. He's already been arrested. He's been charged. He's going to a courtroom. Let it happen out there instead of taking little teeny pieces of the puzzle and making assertions that we don't even know are true. Let him Let it
Well, I
play out in
think
the
based on
courtroom.
my 20 years of experience on the Los Angeles Police Department as a supervisor, as
Well, you told me- you just told me it was routine that this-
excessive force,
You
I
just
get to
told me
make
that this
kind
was
of
all
an assessment.
routine.
All
You
right.
say it's routine in all police forces?
It's absolutely routine for officers to become aggressive at the end of a foot pursuit. It happens all the
It's
time.
not routine.
I
It
have witnessed
happens.
it
It's not
myself.
routine.
And we will
Wow.
certainly
It
leave it
happens.
there. We know this conversation is going to continue.